Chapter 23. Stenar's Three Beautiful Daughters. The story of the Stenar's three daughters travelled far and wide across the northern lands. Agnetha, the eldest, was renowned for her unparalleled beauty and remarkable achievements. With her long, thick hair cascading down her graceful figure, she could easily cover her whole body with it. Her hair was fine as silk, and its amber colour with a tinge of gold illuminated her appearance with a heavenly radiance. Her slender figure and tall height were perfectly complemented by her handsome head, featuring a Grecian nose like those of her noble ancestors. Her dreamy blue eyes contrasted charmingly with her fresh complexion, glowing with a hue of soft pinkness. Her teeth were a row of pearls set between her lovely cherry lips, while her hands were elegantly slender, and her feet were perfectly proportioned with a high arch. Her gait was dignified, and her sweet, soft voice was the final touch to her perfection. Gimle, the second daughter, was named after the goddess of the sea, Ingrid. With her medium height, she was somewhat fleshier than Agnetha, but no less beautiful. She had inherited her father's features, and her eyes sparkled with the same dreamy blue shade as her eldest sister, but her cheeks were ruddier. Gimle's body was well knit due to constant exercise from her favourite pursuits of riding and walking. She was accomplished and learned, having been taught Greek by a bondwoman captured in Greece. She loved the company of wise and scholarly men, and above all admired valor in men. Good looks meant nothing to her if they were without courage, accomplishments, and good manners. The youngest daughter, Gunhild, was named after the two Hedin, Gun, and Hild. She was 19 years old and not yet as accomplished as her sisters, but no less beautiful. Her hair was a cascading waterfall of dark hues, and her features were delicate, with a rosy flush on her cheeks. Her eyes were blue, like her sisters, and sparkled with a hint of mischief. She was still finding her place in the world, trying out different pursuits, and uncovering hidden talents as she went. These three daughters of Stenar were the pride of the northern lands, and their beauty and accomplishments were celebrated far and wide. Gunhild, the youngest of the sisters, stood just as tall as her eldest sibling. Her luscious chestnut locks boasted darker shades here and there, framing her striking face. Her ice-blue eyes were said to be an exact replica of her mother's, and her nose was straight and perfect. When she flashed her small, pearly teeth in a smile, it was nothing short of enchanting. During the summer, her skin browned under the sun, but her rosy cheeks remained as striking as ever. Of all her sisters, Gunhild was the most coquettish. She loved to make men of all ages and walks of life fall captive to her charm and wit. With a mere flick of her hair, she could make any man feel like he was her favourite. But, despite all of the attention she received, she had never truly experienced love, and doubted that she ever would. The sisters were the epitome of aristocracy, with manners so refined that it seemed as though they were born into royalty. Their beauty was unparalleled, and many believed that the Nornir had crafted them to be the most beautiful daughters of the earth. They possessed all of the qualities that made women alluring to men, captivating even the bravest and most intellectual men in the land. Their presence at the games was always a spectacle. Players would rise to greater heights, the skalds would become more inspired, and each guest tried their best to win their favour. Sons of powerful hersers, great warriors and champions from far-off lands undertook daring feats just for a chance to be in their presence. Their beauty and grace was the greatest prize in all of the Viking lands, and only those of Odin's kin could ever hope to marry them. No son of a chief had ever been brave enough to ask for the hand of any of one of the three sisters. They all knew that they needed to accomplish great feats of heroism to even have a chance, for there was nothing the Vikings admired more than a charming woman, and they were the epitome of chivalry towards them. The sisters lived in a skemma, or bower, where they spent their days sewing, embroidering, and doing other handiwork while accompanied by their free and bond servants. They received visitors in their home, and each owned several bondwomen who were considered part of the family. The bondwomen had been captured as children, with 2 coming from Britain, 2 from the northern shores of Gaul, and 2 from the Mediterranean. One was of Roman origin, and the other was Greek. Agnetha, who had been managing her father's household since her mother's passing 2 years earlier, took pride in her skills of brewing ale and creating the finest linen and wool fabrics for clothing. Despite the curiosity of those who had never been to Uppsalir, the sisters had not made an appearance in the hall since the arrival of Gunnar. Men prepared themselves with great care, hoping to impress the sisters if they were to happen upon them. The bower where the sisters resided was a remarkable structure, with other buildings attached to it. Visitors would enter through a stunning pointed porch adorned with intricate carvings, leading to a large everyday room equipped with numerous looms and spinning wheels. Meals and merriment abounded within the walls of the grand abode. Shelves lined the space, flaunting a collection of beautiful dishes, cups, and tableware. The scene was quite impressive, with ornate drinking horns catching the light in just the right way. Further exploration led the curious to additional sprawling rooms on the same floor. One must-see was the sewing and embroidering room. Adventuring on, stairs led intrepid visitors upwards to the verandas. These open, spacious platforms stretched along both sides of the upper floor, affording access to multiple bedrooms. Agnetha enjoyed the privacy of her own bedroom, while Gimle and Gunhild shared a sleeping chamber. Their sleeping quarters were fitted with beds that rested against the walls. Between them was a grand closet, crafted to resemble the very walls and beds it divided. Heavy, handmade woolen curtains in vibrant hues draped the structure artfully, adding to the already impressive visual appeal. 2 steps lead occupants into their slumber spaces. Other luxe furnishings included carved chairs, tables, and cupboards. Movable closets, lavished with intricate and beautiful carved designs, held court in the grand bedrooms. For the benefit of the trio of sisters, several smaller spaces were allocated entirely to the handling of their vast wardrobes. Multiple large, painted wooden chests stored countless items. An entire room was dedicated to their dresses. Festive gowns with their long trains dangled from fittings. These were only adorned for significant occasions. Many of these pieces were crafted from brocade or other expensive woolens and encrusted with gold and silver threads. Sleeves ran long in that era, often going all the way down to the wrists. When these dresses were worn, the waists usually displayed a carefully crafted gold belt, adorned with bags dangling with precious items. More commonplace kirtles adorned a separate area, a contrast to the grandeur of their festal counterparts. These everyday dresses were often fashioned from cotton or woolen materials and were generally quite diverse in their patterning. Mantles of many varieties filled another part of the space. The finest among them, the skikja and motul, were reserved for women of high birth. These sleeveless items were often fastened at the neck by way of an expensive, unique brooch or valuable hooks. Differing colors such as red, brown, purple, and blue were often adorned with either a wide braid or lace along the edges. For winter's chill, occupants could select from cloaks lined with a variation of fur. Additionally, a smaller room held all their linen and silk undergarments. Bringing up the rear of the breathtaking closet spaces were quite several elegant small boxes. Gilded hinges set off the expensive jewelry closures, with prestigious ones being carved from exquisite boxwood. Those reserved for jewelry storage could often hold long hairpins for those nights when a grand knot on the back of the head was desired. The pins glistened in the light, some made of pure gold and others with silver adornments and golden tops of diverse shapes. Diadems of gold glinted as well, some fashioned with snake heads at the ends, inscribed with runic letters that displayed the names of their masters. Necklaces of gold were plentiful. Some had golden rods with crescent moons dangling from them. The Roman coins of gold, with loops attached, were strung on golden chains, fitted to be worn around the neck. Pendants crafted from delicate gold filigree sparkled, while bracelets of varied patterns and abundance rested nearby, some with spiral shapes that were so elegant that no modern-day jeweler could compare. Among the bracelets, the Sviagris and Henitud stood out and were known for their beauty and long-standing history in the family. The collection of gold and mosaic beads was mesmerizing, showcasing expert skills of workmanship using rare and exotic materials. Iridescent crystal balls adorned with ancient Greek inscriptions and amber beads of warm hues glimmered in the light. Gold buttons and hooks of every size and shape completed the dazzling array, scattered en masse in a large bowl. Brooches of every description, old and new, hovered nearby, some passed down for generations. Cruciform fibulae of bronze, some with horse or animal heads, and others circular or in the shape of the swastika, caught the eye. The latter is a recognizable sign dating back to Troy and is seen today on Buddha statues' feet in India. Bronze circles covered in a sheet of repousse goldwork, portraying intricate designs, and brooches made entirely of exquisite silver gilt accented the collection. The piece de resistance among the display was undoubtedly the gold bracteates. These circular, pure gold discs varied in size, ranging from 1 to 8 inches in diameter. Their distinctive designs and cutouts, such as animal shapes or unique geometric patterns, are what made them noteworthy. Worn elegantly on the breast, These delicate bracteates were a true testament to the family's wealth and grandeur. Chapter 24. The Guests of the Hraidar of Fylkir. The Hraidar of Fylkir's daughters were hosting a remarkable gathering of their young kinswomen during the summer months. They had all come to be present at the games, and among them were Thora, daughter of one of the powerful Hersirs, who ruled over one of the largest herods in what we now know as European Russia, Alfhild, daughter of one of the Hersirs of Holmgard, and Hildegun, the daughter of a formidable Hraidar from the island of Funen that was almost as powerful as the Hraidar of Zealand. Randgrid, Gerlaug, Ingigerd, and Sigrid were also present daughters of great Hersirs in their own right. One young woman stood out from the rest, however, and her name was Thorny. She was not only one of the prettiest, but was also the most intelligent of them all. At 18 years old, her hazel eyes were full of poetry and fire, and her broad forehead showed intellect. Her head was adorned with a mass of light brown hair, and when she smiled, she revealed a bewitching set of pearly teeth. Thorny was full of life, and she openly declared that she preferred the company of men to that of women. On the third evening of the gathering, the men of the highest lineage assembled in the great banqueting hall and took their respective seats. Agnetha, Thorny's host, her 2 younger sisters, and all their female guests then entered the hall to a murmur of admiration. It was the first time in the recollection of the oldest men that so many high-born and beautiful maidens, daughters of chiefs who ruled over powerful realms and who were of Odin's kin, had been in Uppsalir simultaneously. It was certainly the greatest gathering of men and women anyone could remember. The flower of womanhood was there, and all that was chivalrous and brave in the land had come to join them. Each maiden held a drinking horn of gold filled with either mead, ale, or wine, and she offered it to the guests. The warriors gathered around, drawing lots to decide where they would sit for the evening's festivities. Those who drew the lots that placed them beside the maidens counted themselves fortunate, including Gunnar, who found himself seated beside Gimle and Ingunn next to Agnetha. Sigbrit sat with Svanhild while Sigmund was paired with Solveig. Throughout the night they talked and laughed, enjoying each other's company. They were all delighted with their seating companions and hoped for the chance to be beside them again at future gatherings. It wasn't long before everyone took notice of the 4 Raudasandur brothers, who always seemed to be accompanied by the same maidens. Rumours spread that weddings would soon follow as the strength of their bond was palpable. The day before the games, Agnetha had a dream. In it, her Disir appeared to her. These guardian spirits watched over each family member and often appeared in dreams to offer guidance and warning. Agnetha's Disir took the form of a tall woman walking on water, approaching her home. The woman warned Agnetha and her sisters to be careful not to fall in love with the sons of a powerful berserk who were coming to Uppsalir. She then showed Agnetha a vision of 12 eagles tearing at the flesh of men before instructing her to receive Gunnar and his brothers well. She promised to continue protecting Agnetha and her family before leaving her with a final farewell. Agnetha awakened with a start, deeply troubled by her dream. Seeking answers, she turned to Thorhalla, known throughout the land for her expertise as an interpreter of dreams. To Agnetha's surprise, however, Thorhalla refused to hear her dream, and instead instructed her to seek out Bringerd for guidance. After a long journey, Agnetha arrived at Bringerd's home, where she recounted her dream in detail. Bringerd listened intently, and then gave her a grave warning. The woman in her dream was her Disir, a guardian spirit sent to forewarn her of impending danger. The 12 eagles symbolized the 12 sons of the berserk Hervard, and their wrath would soon fall upon Agnetha. Terrified by the prophecy, Agnetha returned home and immediately began preparations for a sacrifice to her Disir. Her sisters joined in the preparations, gathering at their special hall with an altar for sacrifice. 2 black oxen and a handsome horse were chosen for the offering. Meanwhile, Gunnar and his Raudasandur brothers made their way toward the sisters' bower, completely unaware of the sacrifice taking place. As they drew near, a bondmaid caught sight of them and hurried to warn Agnetha and her sisters. Agnetha was beside herself with fear as she rushed out to confront the approaching men. She implored them not to come any closer, warning them that the place was sacred and they risked angering Odin. Gunnar, however, was undeterred, declaring that he would brave Odin's wrath for the sake of the maidens of Fylkir. Despite his bold words, he and his companions chose to honor the sisters' sacred space and kept their distance during the sacrifice. After their declaration, the Raudasandur siblings veered off to a different path. Agnetha made her way back to the room, and alongside her sisters, stained the altar with the blood of the animals they sacrificed. They entreated their ancestral guardians to continue safeguarding them. Chapter 25. Beginning of the Athletic Games. The day of the Athletic Games, called the Idrotir, had finally arrived. All the warriors and champions who planned to participate had made their way to the event by land or sea. For days leading up to the games, one could see men training and preparing themselves everywhere, and tents were scattered in every direction. The fairest and most beautiful women and maidens from all the Viking realms had gathered in Uppsalir, eager to witness the contests. Many of them were daughters of Halds and Bondi, who owned vast tracts of land and rivaled in power some of the Herseers. Along with the high-born women, there was also a vast multitude of commoners who had arrived, bringing their tents and provisions and setting up at any place they could find. On the day of the games, at dawn, a great crowd had already assembled on the Idrotir fields. Among the daughters of Herseers and high-born men present were Sini, Ragnhild, Helga, Hjordis, Sigrid, Ingebjorg, Thora, Sigrun, Gudrun, Herborg, Bringerd, Rangrid, Kara, Thorhalla, Bergthora, Grimhild, Brynhild, Gudrod, Asta, Hilderid, Thorgerd, Thordis, Ingegerd, Thurid, Hungerd, Halgerd, Hildegun, Asgerd, Ulfhild, Gaida, Thiri, Olrun, Svanhild, Hrefna. Women were usually one of the most captivating aspects of the games. They came to applaud and cheer on the contestants, urging the men to do their utmost best. It was no surprise that the saying went that many hearts were lost at the games, and that numerous engagements and weddings would take place in the year that followed. The sight of these lovely ladies filled every man with the ambition to become a champion, including Gunnar. They all shared the same thought, saying to themselves, "I must become a champion so that these fair creatures may admire me." It was no wonder that so many handsome girls and women had sent such a thrill of admiration through the vast multitude, as they stood as representatives of all that was beautiful, graceful, and accomplished in the Norse lands. A parterre of exquisite flowers couldn't have presented a more delightful sight. The women were clad in their most becoming day or walking dress, which reached just above their ankles. Their foreheads were adorned with diadems of gold, and their necks and arms with necklaces and bracelets of gold. Their waists were decorated with belts of variegated patterns and exquisite workmanship, displaying the taste and skill of the goldsmith. All the women wore cloaks draped elegantly over their shoulders in various colors such as red, purple, blue, brown, and white. The cloaks were adorned with silver and gold embroidery, and secured in place by beautiful golden brooches. Sigmund could not contain his admiration. What a spectacular sight! Look at their thick and lustrous hair, Raudasandur brothers. The women displayed all shades of blonde hair, from the lightest flaxen to the darkest auburn and chestnut. Sigbrit, pointing towards a stunning maiden with beautiful golden hair, exclaimed, "Look how luxuriously her hair glows against the azure sky. And her eyes, they are as deep blue as the sea we see when we are far from land." Gunnar also pointed out a beautiful maiden. "Notice her hair hanging down her back, swaying in the breeze. It is like a field of wheat, glistening under the sun's rays." Ingunn admired a ravishing maiden with raven hair. "Look at her eyes. They seem to emit flames. She must be descended from the Huns in Gardariki. Her raven hair was unique among the mostly fair-haired maidens, and she was much adored for it." Sigbrit marveled at the women's eyes. "Raudasandur brothers, have you ever seen such eyes before? They are like arrows in a quiver, waiting to pierce us with love. Some are dreamy, while others twinkle with mischief. Some are so piercing, while a few are fiery enough to make us want to avoid their wrath. Observe their colors, from deep blue to amethyst and greenish tourmaline. And the hazel ones, though rare, are so beautiful and poetic. They radiate flashes of genius and then return to their dreamy state. Truly, eyes are the windows to our thoughts, expressing our love, sorrow, or fury." Among the great Vikings vying for the championship were Erling, Vigrid, Ingvald, Sigbrit, Bodvar, Hervard, Ingemund, Heidrek, Thorolf, Halvard, Asmund, Agnar, Ragnar, Hodbrod, Gunnar, Volsung, Thorvald, Siggeir, Thordis, Einar, Bjorn, Ulf, Sigmund, Ogmund, Vemund, Thormod, Gautrek, Thorbrand, Indridi, Gauti, Vikar, Frithjolf, Hrolf, Hjalmter, Halfdan, Eric the Red, Alrek, Ottar, Visbur, Refil, Adils, Ingald, Havar, Randver, Hogni, Arnvid, Grammer, Kolbak, Jorund, Arnkel, Skeggi, Hromund, Hord, Gisli, Thorkel, Egil, Arnbjorn, Ingolf, Leif, Erling, Glum, Ogvald, and Viga. These men, and many others present, embodied all that was chivalrous and brave in the Norse world. They had travelled from foreign lands, conquering and fighting, carrying their victorious standards before them everywhere. Their ruddy faces revealed their seafaring backgrounds, having fought many times with great skill against the daughters of the sea gods. These Vikings had encountered terrifying gales during their voyages on the North Sea, the Atlantic Ocean, and even the Mediterranean. Many could tell tales of their kinsmen who had passed away on their way to or from home. But fear was unknown to them all. What superb specimens of manhood they were! They were the finest in the world, Spartan-like appearance, with strong chests, powerful frames, and prominent muscles. These men had been trained and practiced for athletic games since childhood, and had lived much of their lives in the open air. They had splendid proportions, with many being tall or of medium height, while a few were short but hardy and agile. Most of them were fair, but some had dark hair and beards. These Vikings were fearless and ferocious, eager to prove their strength and valor. Steinar arrived with his 3 beautiful daughters, a bevy of young maidens, wives of Herseers and Halds, and other guests, taking their places on an elevated spot on the field where they could survey the games. Agnetha was adorned in a dazzling red kirtle, adorned with intricate detailing, and draped in a scarlet cloak decorated with lace. Her fair, lengthy tresses cascaded down her back, reaching far below her waist. Gimli donned a woven mantle of a rich blue hue, draped over a scarlet dress and held together by a glistening gold belt. Her hair vaulted down her waist on both sides, which she gathered and tucked under her belt. Gunhild chose a kirtle, a light and short dress perfectly hugging her waist, and layered it with a snug blue jacket. In a gathering of distinguished women, Drifa, the wife of the Hreidar of the island of Zealand, stood accompanied by 3 bondmaids. Her attire of choice was a red dress with tight long sleeves, narrow below, and hugged tightly around her waist with gold cloth. Her long, luscious hair was left to sway and bounce as she walked. Over her shoulder hung a white cloak of ethereal beauty, embellished with gold origination. Equally as eye-catching was Halgerd, a stunning woman and widow to the former Hreidar of the island of Fien, donning the most tasteful ensemble, accentuated by a glistening gold belt that showed off her graceful figure impeccably. Steinar, the Herseers, and numerous eminent men and skalds positioned themselves purposefully and formed the jury. As soon as Gunnar and his Raudasandur brothers appeared on the fields, they approached to greet the daughters of the Hreidar of Fylkir and all the guests that graced the event. A flurry of toothy-grinned smiles and elegant bows conveyed how much they appreciated the gesture, for several women blushed as a result. Immediately after, Gunnar and his Raudasandur brothers made their way to acknowledge Steinar and the other Herseers. Steinar Gunnar was asked if he had previous experience in athletic games. Gunnar humbly responded, "My Raudasandur father thought I knew many things well, but I have not yet shown it to others. I think thou wilt find it not as polished when compared to some men." He recalled his father's advice, thinking that a man should not brag, but rather be prudent in their demeanour and acknowledge that the tongue is the head's bane, and responded accordingly. Then the competition began. Everyone prepared themselves for contests like wrestling, jumping, leaping, swimming, running, and ball games. There were also warlike exercises that highlighted their skills in the use of spears, swords, and bows and arrows. Chapter 26. Great Feats of Gunnar and Ingunn. The games kicked off with wrestling, an event favoured by many. The wrestlers grappled with each other, fighting to bring their opponent down to the ground. The Sviars and the Gotlanders were matched up against each other. The former had been reigning champions for a few years, but Gunnar of the Gotlanders had his sights set on taking them down. The contestants drew lots, splitting themselves into 2 teams, standing in rows with their leaders at the forefront. They paired off their wrestlers in the arena, taking turns wrestling with each other until a winner emerged. Gunnar's team was outnumbered, so 2 of the Sviar's men were removed to even out the playing field. As they began, the competitors shed their outer garments to be more nimble and light on their feet. The crowd eagerly watched as each wrestler showed off the fruits of their long hours of training. Muscles bulged and sweat glistened as bodies fought for dominance. The contest was neck and neck, with competitors falling from both sides. At times the wrestling was intense, and onlookers gaped at the flexing muscles of the combatants. The Sviars seemed to have the upper hand, with their 4th from the last wrestler winning against all the Gotlanders except for Gunnar, who was the only one left to carry the team. He and his opponent grappled for what seemed like an eternity, until finally the Sviar fell. Then Gunnar faced the final 3 wrestlers from the opposing team and threw them down one by one. A triumphant cheer erupted from the stands, making a sound like thunder in the distance as his Raudasandur brothers rushed to congratulate him, filled with joy at his victory. Gunnar and his Raudasandur brothers headed to the hall for their day meal, with Sigmund trailing behind. As they walked, Sigmund noticed a beautiful young woman staring at him. Her fair face was difficult to ignore, and her red lace dress caught his eye. Her flaxen hair cascaded down her shoulders, and Sigmund was immediately smitten. He inquired about her and learned her name was Thora Lacehand, and that her brother Thorir ruled a herod. Sigmund was captivated by her beauty and approached her, recalling their previous encounter during a midwinter sacrifice. After their meal, they relaxed for a while and then went back to the games to observe. On the second day of the contest, the rules of the wrestling match changed to more complex grappling techniques, with both contestants vying to bring the other to the ground. Gunnar, the previous day's champion, didn't want to stand out, so he dressed in a hooded cloak to hide his identity. One of the wrestlers, Thorbjorn, was exceptionally strong and had already defeated everyone who stepped up to him. Thorbjorn walked around, selecting participants to compete against, with the crowd cheering him on. As he got to the end of the line, he challenged the champions from the previous day's contest. Spotting a large figure in a hood, Thorbjorn approached and took hold of his hand. Try as he might, Thorbjorn couldn't budge the seemingly immovable man in the cloak, leaving him in disbelief. In a heated tone, Thorbjorn exclaimed, "No one has ever stood so steadfastly before me as you do. Who are you?" With that, he pulled his hood down and revealed Gunnar Hjorvardson's face. "If you want to take part in this contest with me, you are most welcome." Gunnar replied, "I no longer wrestle, though I once enjoyed it greatly." The match began between the 2 opponents. Thorbjorn charged at Gunnar, who stood his ground without flinching. In one swift move, Gunnar lifted Thorbjorn over his head, grabbed hold of his breeches, and threw him behind him. Thorbjorn landed with a thud on his shoulders, which the crowd celebrated with rapturous cheers. Then Thorbjorn's brother Angul challenged Gunnar, to which he responded by saying, "Let me rest for a moment and I'll be ready for you." The 2 powerful men grappled with each other, falling to their knees twice. They squeezed so tightly that they turned blue due to the pressure. Eventually, Angul fell, defeated. Gunnar had proven himself to be so strong that the onlookers were eager to see 2 wrestlers try to take him on at the same time, which was against the rules. However, if a wrestler was willing to withstand such a challenge, he could do so. Gunnar said he thought he would be able to manage it in the afternoon, after taking a short break. Later that day, 2 of the strongest wrestlers attacked Gunnar simultaneously. They grappled courageously but failed to throw Gunnar. After a while, both men fell to the ground. Everyone was overjoyed with this spectacle. When the wrestling came to an end, the crowd thanked the wrestlers for their performance. All were in agreement that even though facing 2 opponents was unfair, Gunnar was the champion of wrestling. As night fell, skalds sang tales of great warriors, and everyone present dressed in their finest outfits. The ball games were the biggest draw of the event, lasting for 2 full days due to the sheer number of participants. There were 3 distinct types of ball games: Natlik, Soplik, and Skoffelik. The last one, played during the winter months on ice, was especially popular among the locals in one particular area. All of the games involved a certain level of danger, as the balls were made of either wood or scraped horn, enclosed in leather, and hit with force through the use of bats. Horde, a highly skilled ball player from Zealand, had sent a challenge to Hrafn's men to compete for the championship title. They chose players of equal strength to ensure a fair match. The game was played as follows. One person would throw the ball into the air and hit it with a bat, sending it flying towards another player who would catch it and hurl it back. The opposing team would try to interfere by shoving, pushing, or striking the ball from the player's grasp. If the ball landed out of bounds or on the ground, the person who first hit it would have to retrieve it. Ingun was widely recognized as the best ball player in Engel, having won numerous championships before. Horde was equally impressive, earning himself a massive following due to his popularity and strength. The game started energetically, with both teams eager to emerge victorious. As the teams battled it out, the Gotlanders eventually came out on top, though the match left several players on both sides badly injured. Other ball games also took place simultaneously on different parts of the field, with spectators cheering them on with equal gusto. On the 4th day of the event, there was a larger turnout, with many more people eager to participate in the games. Among them were 2 strangers, Hrafn and Krak from the island of Bornholm, who, after greeting Steinar, threw down the gauntlet, insisting that no one could play better than they could. As the 2 brothers swaggered about their skills, many were intrigued enough to invite them to play. Despite claiming to be rough-handed, the brothers were proud of their strength and promised to take on all comers. The champions of Steinar, however, were not fazed. They were confident they could handle themselves no matter what transpired. True to their word, the brothers played with savage abandon, pushing and knocking down their opponents. By the end of the evening, many were left with bruises and injuries. The next day, Sigbrit convinced Sigmund to join him in playing against the brothers. With Hrafn and Krak already in the fields, ready to challenge, the game began. Hrafn, taking the ball, and Krak, wielding the bat, played as they always did. But Sigbrit had a trick up his sleeve, stealing the ball from Hrafn and snatching the bat from Krak. The brothers were unable to regain control, and Sigbrit and Sigmund emerged victorious, earning the championship to cheers from the constant crowd, including Steinar, Agnetha and her sisters, and a bevy of maidens. Amidst the running games, there were those who raced against fast horses or each other. In this contest, there were many eager competitors. The fleetest horses from Uppsalir or Fylkir were selected to participate, with the runners donning only tights for the race. One of the competitors, Ingunn, was known to be one of the swiftest runners around. He was matched up against the fastest of the horses. As the signal to start sounded, Ingunn took off with the horse close behind. Though the animal kept pace with him for most of the race, Ingunn ultimately managed to cross the finish line ahead of it. One disbelieving spectator even suggested that Ingunn cheated by holding on to the saddle girth strap and letting the horse pull him along. But Ingunn hotly denied the accusation. Next up was Steinar's fast horse, but Ingunn remained unfazed. He took off from the start again and ran ahead of the horse the entire way. After the race, Ingunn challenged the umpire to say whether or not he had cheated by holding on to the saddle girth strap. The umpire had no such accusation this time and declared Ingunn the winner. The stallion took a moment to catch its breath, its heaving sides glinting in the sun. Its rider, prodding it with his spurs, urged it forward once more. Ingunn, waiting for the umpire's signal, prepared himself for the race ahead. And as soon as the shout came, he burst forth, his legs pumping with incredible speed. In no time at all, he had left the horse far behind, crossing the finish line with ease. The crowd erupted in applause, voices ringing out in cheers and whistles. Even the daughters of Steinar, seated at the sidelines, joined in, their approval ringing out. Agnetha, though perhaps caught up in the moment, shouted out something a little too enthusiastic. "Well done, Ingunn Gudbrandsson of Engel," she cried, red-faced with sudden embarrassment. Over the next 2 days the town would be consumed with games and exercises, each man trying to outdo the others. And when Steinar asked Gunnar if he was skilled in such matters, Gunnar remained typically humble. He knew he'd won a few championships already, but his luck couldn't hold out forever. Still, he'd give it his all. It was then that Ulf, a mighty Viking rumoured to be the best archer in all of Norway, approached Gunnar. "Let's test our skills," Ulf said, both challenging and respectful. "I hear you're quite the marksman yourself." Ulf took hold of a spear and plunged its point into the ground. He then readied his bow and placed an arrow on the string, pulling it back and letting the arrow fly into the sky. The arrow twisted and turned before plummeting back down, its point landing perfectly on the end of the spear shaft, standing upright for all to see. Gunnar followed suit and shot his arrow, sending it high into the air until it too came down, this time landing on the shaft of Ulf's arrow that had stuck on the spear. Ulf then picked up another spear and threw it with such incredible force, yet still managing to keep it straight, causing everyone to marvel at his skill. But it was Gunnar who truly impressed them all, throwing his spear even farther so that the socket landed on the point of Ulf's spear. Ulf was not deterred, picking up his spear again and shooting it even farther than Gunnar's. "I won't throw any more, there's no point," declared Gunnar. "Throw," countered Ulf, "and farther if you can." Gunnar complied, throwing his spear even further ahead. Then Ulf took out his bow and placed a knife into an oak tree, aiming for the back of the handle. He shot the arrow and it landed with a thunk, sticking fast into the knife handle. Gunnar praised him for his skill and the gold-wound arrows he used. "These arrows weren't made by me. They were given to me," Gunnar replied, shooting his arrow and splitting the knife handle, its point sticking in the upper point of the blade. "Now let's shoot even farther," said Ulf, placing an arrow on the string and drawing the bow so tightly that its tips almost touched. The arrow flew far and landed perfectly in a slender bough, causing everyone to cheer in admiration. Yet it was Gunnar who shocked them all, shooting his arrow even farther and piercing a nut that had been hung up as a target. "Let's take that nut and place it on Bjorn's head," said Ulf, "and see if you can hit it from the same distance. Bjorn is my slave, and with his courage and bravery during this trial, I will grant him his freedom if he survives." Bjorn was brimming with joy and ready to take any risk to secure his freedom. After all, who doesn't want to break free from shackles? "Will you stand still and not flinch if I aim at the nut?" Gunnar asked. "Without a doubt," replied Bjorn confidently, having witnessed Gunnar's expertise with a bow and arrow. "Then Ulf shall stand beside you," Gunnar said. "Let's see if I can hit that nut." Ulf took his place and Gunnar got ready, taking careful aim before letting the arrow fly. It sailed over Bjorn's head and under the nut, but luckily Bjorn remained unscathed. The nut rolled back, but the arrow kept going. "Did you hit the nut?" Stennar inquired. "Better than that," Ulf answered. "He shot under the nut, and it rolled away without touching Bjorn." The crowd was stunned by Gunnar's incredible skill and gave him a thunderous round of applause. Bjorn was granted his freedom, and Gimli seemed to be the most overjoyed of them all. Gunnar wasn't done showing off, however. He picked up his sword and wielded it expertly in both his left and right hands, making it seem as if there were 3 blades in the air at once. Then, without warning, he threw the sword high up in the air, caught it with his left hand, and dealt a fierce strike on a shield that someone else held up. Gimli was beside herself with admiration once again. Next, it was time for the leaping games. Many people leaped both forwards and backwards, dressed in full combat gear, but the winner was not clear until Gunnar stepped up. He donned his war dress, complete with helmet, chainmail, sword, and shield, and jumped far higher than his 6-foot height allowed. He then leaped backwards with the same height and agility he had before, sending the crowd into a frenzy of cheers. Everyone conceded that Gunnar deserved the championship title. On the final day of the games, the 12 sons of the mighty berserker Hervard stormed the arena to compete for the championship in swimming. Thorgrim led the pack as the eldest, with Gisli at his heels, followed by Bui, Seming, Hadding, Thorolf, Brani, Angantyr, Arnbjorn, Grim, Barry, and Asbjorn. Each brother was equally strong and skilled, except for Thorgrim, who reigned supreme in both aspects. They were fierce berserks who inherited their father and kin's warlike qualities, and most of them shared his fiery temper. Under Hervard's guidance, they had all fought in battles before turning 15, and since then had raided far and wide, never encountering a foe who could match their strength or courage. They had earned legendary status, thanks to their uncanny knack for victory on the battlefield. The brothers always sailed together on one ship, and did not need any other champion, but they often picked up a great following of ships and men. As a testament to their father's success as a warrior, Hervard had gifted them with several excellent swords that he had acquired in his conquests. Thorgrim wielded the mighty mistletoe, Gisli had Thane, and Bui had Rangvid. Their siblings had swords of equal value and fame among the Viking warriors. In addition to these, they had other superb dueling swords that they had collected from their spoils of war. During the summer they went on military campaigns, but during the winter they stayed home with their father. The previous Yule, all 12 of the brothers were home, and on a night when the men were to make vows over Bragi's horn, they visited their father's hall. After many oaths had been uttered, Bui pledged to marry Agnetha, the eldest daughter of Stennar, the Hreidar of Fylkir. He swore that he would not let anyone else have her if her father or herself refused his proposal. His 11 brothers vowed to support him in this pledge. Their journey to the games was not just to compete. They also intended to seek Agnetha's hand in marriage during a feast that followed the game's conclusion. The jealousy of the brothers towards Agnetha and Ingunn was palpable, but nobody was aware of their errand. The brothers had set their sights on attempting to eliminate the competition by trying to drown Ingunn during the swimming contests. High society had gathered to watch the swimming contests, including Stennar and all the lords and ladies of the land. There was one notable swimmer among them, a man named Olvir, who approached Gunnar with a proposal. "What do you think of a swimming match between us?" Olvir asked. Gunnar was pleased with the idea. "I agree. I've heard that we are both strong swimmers," he replied. The 2 men swam out and matched each other stroke for stroke. They dragged each other down, alternately taking turns holding the other underwater. Eventually their absence from the surface of the water grew so long that the onlookers thought they had drowned. At last, Olvir emerged from the water and swam ashore. He rested but did not dress. Everyone wondered what had happened to Gunnar. After a long interval, Gunnar also emerged from the water. To everyone's surprise, he was sitting on the back of a huge seal. Gunnar held tightly to the beast's bristles with both hands and guided it to the shore. "Why didn't you kill the seal with the knife you carry in your belt?" many people asked. "Because," answered Gunnar, "if I had done that, Olvir, or those who witnessed our contest, would have said that I had found it dead." Even though Olvir was the first to reach the shore, the judges declared that Gunnar was the better swimmer of the two. This pleased all the ladies and women in attendance, as well as Gunnar's male compatriots, but no one was more thrilled than Gimle. The swimming contests continued, including the competition for the bravest swimmer clad in full battle attire. Few attempted this contest. Ingunn, however, dressed in his helmet, chain armor, and sword, wrapped them all in his cloak, strapping the bundle to his back. He hurled his spear handle into the water, diving after it. In one stroke, he retrieved the broken handle and swam towards an island far away, leaving everyone else in awe. Agnetha watched with delight as she cheered on the champion. After the feast, Thorgrim called his brothers to the shore, asking Gisli to drown Ingunn during a swimming competition. Gisli hesitated, thus Thorgrim then turned to Bui, who reluctantly agreed to try. Ingunn accepted the challenge. Bui suggested a long swimming match, to which Ingunn agreed. As they swam, Bui began to tire and suggested they head back. Ingunn, however, continued on. Bui turned back but quickly grew exhausted. Ingunn offered to help, but Bui's pride prevented him from accepting. Ingunn insisted, and they returned to shore together. Bui, grateful for Ingunn's kindness, sat down on a boulder while Thorgrim ordered Arnbjorn to drown Ingunn. "I will not try," replied his brother. "Bui may have attempted the swim, but he gained no glory. Ingunn is the one who has all the fame from the contest." With that, Thorgrim stepped forward and challenged Ingunn. He stripped off his clothes and went into the water with him. As soon as they met, Thorgrim pushed Ingunn down into the depths. Nobody on the shore could see what was happening as they were far beneath the surface, causing the sea to boil above them. Eventually, everything went quiet and Thorgrim swam to shore. Gunnar and his two other Raudasandur brothers grew very worried as they could not see Ingunn. They feared that Thorgrim had killed him, and they swore to avenge his death. Agnetha passed out in her seat, and there was great sadness among the people who had watched the contest. They believed Ingunn had gone to Ingrid's hall without being prepared to go as befitting his status. At the hall that evening, there was no merriment over the beer. Stennar was consumed with anger, thinking that Thorgrim had murdered Ingunn. Thorgrim argued that if Ingunn had drowned, it was due to exhaustion and not because of any foul play. Lights were lit, and Ingunn's high seat remained empty. Suddenly the door of the hall opened, and Ingunn walked in, greeted by cheers of joy. He approached Thorgrim's seat and placed the knife that Thorgrim had worn during the swim on his knee. Everyone realized that Thorgrim had been carrying a knife, which Ingunn had taken from him but spared his life. Ingunn had swum underwater for a while and landed on the other side of a small island where he could not be seen from the shore. After hearing that Ingunn was safe, Agnetha entered the hall with her sisters and friends, carrying a golden horn. She halted at Ingunn's side and hailed him, "Salutations to you, noble Ingunn! 3 cheers for your escape from peril." Then she settled herself beside him, her expression stormy as she glared at the 12 sons of Hervad. Though they seethed with anger towards Ingunn, they concealed it well, their faces betraying nothing. The hall was filled with noise and merriment, and ale flowed freely. Everyone celebrated Ingunn's triumphant survival, save for the 12 brothers who, despite their chagrin, feigned joviality. Chapter 27. The Raudasandur brothers fall in love. At Uppsalir, the meeting of so many people during the games had caused a commotion in the hearts of many a young maiden and valiant warrior. Whispers of love travelled from ear to ear, and many a trusting and confiding Viking daughter pledged eternal love to their chosen suitor. Even those who lived far away or in distant lands promised to make the journey to the fair maidens who had captured their hearts. Of course, they would claim to be visiting their fathers, mothers, or kinsmen, but deep down they knew that it was the daughters who held their true motivation. Such brave warriors and doughty champions so often deluded themselves on such occasions that their ulterior motives would go unnoticed. Some even formed fast friendships and sworn Raudasandur brotherhood during the games. And so, with the time drawing near for the lovers to part, sleepless nights were endured as the thought of separating became unbearable for so many. After all, for how many had love blossomed for the first time? The days just past had been nothing short of delightful. New friends were made, old friendships were revived, beloved faces were reunited after years of separation, and slumbering loves had awoken from their hibernation. However, the games were also destined to leave many with burdens of the heart, broken friendships amongst men or women who had previously been close confidants. For there remained nothing in this world that the friendship of two men, even if they were brothers, could not endure, but for both to love the same woman, envy and hatred were sure to follow. The same can be said for two women, even if they were sisters, who loved the same man. Love cannot be shared, and so many took an oath beforehand to marry such or such a girl, or challenge their successful rival to mortal combat. Thus, many duels were expected to take place because the maidens, who were admired by so many, had not always reciprocated their feelings, and had indeed loved someone else better. One evening, the Raudasandur brothers found themselves in their home, their voices muted by a shared, unspoken sense of contemplation. Suddenly, Sigbrit broke the silence. Addressing his brother Gunnar, he said, "Raudasandur, brother, you seem lost in thought. What occupies your mind?" "I was pondering love," replied Gunnar. "Love was born at the beginning of all things, alongside the world itself. Atoms merged, and from their union all life sprang forth. Pollen flits through the air, traversing seas and lands to embrace another flower and proclaim, 'I love you.' The sea kisses the shore, while the moon and stars caress the night. The breeze dallies with land and water, the sun warms the earth, the dawn greets the day, and twilight ushers in the night. Heat and cold, dew, flowers, meadows, and woods, all kissed by the rain. Men and women alike were brought into this world through love, wandering until they find their match. It is part of their very being. Life without love is comparable to non-existence." Ingunn added, "Woman is the very embodiment of love, the essence of all sweetness and beauty in life. She represents the most supreme creation of the gods' power. When we fall for a woman, we forget about Odin. We would give the last drop of our blood as we die before her eyes, proving our manly heroism and bravery, and thus capture her love." An impassioned Ingunn cried out, "O love, embrace me with your strength. Stand by me until death steals me away. Bring your vivifying breath to my lips until you become a part of me, for I cannot bear to live without you. When Mother Earth, who has comforted and cared for me so tenderly, embraces me in her final embrace, and forever obscures me to the light of this beautiful world I love so much, O love, enshroud me with your immortality." "You must be in love," teased the three Raudasandur brothers after Ingunn's speech. "Spoke the heart of one in love," Sigbrit corroborated. "Love, after all, lurks within the hearts of all Raudasandur brothers."